alone, that increase is $8 million additional property taxes in this fiscal year alone. And if you look over what Legislative Council has estimated to be the 6-year time frame impact of this so-called mill levy freeze or property tax increase, in Mesa County alone, it's estimated, and I think it's a low estimate, of $100 million extra property taxes to be collected in Mesa County alone this year.
And why that's so important is it doesn't mean extra money for the Grand Junction schools, because it just means that the local taxpayers pay more for that, and the state, you guys, get to backfill less. And that's why you had $118 million more this year to play with, and in 10 years you're supposed to have up to $4 billion more without a vote.
Because of what happened in Senate Bill 199, and thankfully the district court found to be unconstitutional. It is a huge problem when the legislature starts acting in a way that a majority of the legislature starts acting in a way that is clearly contrary to the terms of our state constitution, but that's precisely what happened with Senate Bill 199.
All right. Now, when I say there wasn't a vote, the state will say, and the governor will say, of course there was a vote. In many of these school districts, they had so-called debrucings. You had a terrific witness. We had a terrific witness, Marcia Neal, who is a board member on a school board out in Mesa County.
Right, the big one out there, Mesa County Valley.
And basically, she really said it. She said, we asked for debrucing so we could keep some extra grant money, so we could get the money from bake sales and sporting events. We never promised, we never said this was going to jack up your property taxes.
No, they promised, she said they promised it would not have any impact on property taxes. If you look at the actual board resolutions themselves, and when Marcia Neal, who was on the school board at the time, you look at those actual resolutions, and the actual resolutions make it very crystal clear that this is not going to have any impact on property taxes, that the focus was on non-federal grants. And that was just making sure that the school district, whatever monies were coming in at the time, that they could keep them for the benefit of the school kids in Mesa County. Now, as a result of this change, you're talking about, you know, soaking taxpayers in the state of Colorado to the tune of, like you say, probably an estimated $4 billion of additional tax money coming in the next 10 years, $4 billion with no benefit whatsoever to the school districts.
For what the state says and what Bill Ritter says, for this to make sense, that people actually gave permission in all these school districts for this to happen, you'd have to believe that in Grand Junction, for instance, when the board member and the school board went out for that debrucing, can we keep the extra school cake sale money and the grant money we're getting in for our charter schools? You'd have to believe that a decade ago, the people of Grand Junction not only knew that a decade later, the governor was spearhead a change to state law, and that state law would start jacking up their property taxes forever, and that they were okay with that, and they understood that. They didn't, and it wasn't even in the language. Now, the other side, let me say what the other side would say. I was there in court. They would say, listen, if you read the fine print in those ballot initiatives said, we get to keep all extra money. And it says we're not going to raise rates. We didn't raise rates, but we've had a change now. The problem here, Richard, is that those people throughout those districts didn't read the fine print. And if only they read the fine print, they would have known that a decade later, some governor they hadn't even heard of would make a change, making their property taxes go skyrocketing forever. That was their point. What did you say in response?
You have to look at the measures themselves. They say nothing about property taxes. If you want to actually change the property tax revenue limit, I believe the Constitution is very clear. The voters have to approve a change in the property tax revenue limit. If you want to have voters be saddled with a change in policy, tax policy is the way it's referred to in the state constitution. If you want to have voters approve that change in tax policy that's going to lead to an increase in revenues, you have to explain it to them. It has to be, at least in some simple, common sense way, explain to them this is what could happen if you vote yes. Not only were they not given that information, and that's really at the core of this. I mean, what the Constitution requires is when you're raising revenue, you've got to be very specific that that your vote yes is going to lead to an increase in taxes. Not only was there no express notice or fair notice on either the text of the measure itself. not only was that not made clear to them, but they were specifically told the opposite.
So
that's what this case really gets down to. They were told the opposite.
The question on the ballot 10 years ago in these different districts was often, can we keep the change? We made a little extra money on bake sales and grants. Can we keep that extra money? And we promise this isn't going to raise your taxes.
This will have no impact on your taxes.
Nothing. And what I felt so sorry about folks like Marcia Neal, a very sweet lady, basically Bill Ritter and the legislature turned her into a liar. She said, I went to my church and I said, this isn't going to raise your taxes. And now she's got to face that congregation and they say, what happened here? Now, let me bring it over here. When we filed this court case, governor's office wasn't too happy. In fact, the governor's spokesman said things like, this is a tasteless stunt. This is another John Caldera stunt to hold the children of Colorado hostage, which I found pretty interesting given that it was this amendment, this new law that doesn't give any money to kids. Was this a tasteless stunt, and how in the world can they say this was a tasteless stunt now that the courts have found it to be unconstitutional? Because
they have nothing left to say. And frankly, I would like to thank the Independence Institute for taking the lead on it, because having done that, we are now able to go out and demand that the state act in a way that is constitutional. And it is strange for them to say what they did then, what the governor said then, and for his spokesman to say that it's not a surprise. We knew all along that this was going to go to the Supreme Court after they get a contrary ruling from the trial court. So this is constantly moving on their part. I'm not sure that they ever really had a plan to deal with that, but now they need to have a plan. Otherwise, the students in the state of Colorado are going to suffer. And their argument, the attorney for the governor argued in court that if it is unconstitutional, the money shouldn't come from the state to be rebated to taxpayers. It should come from the local school districts to be rebated to the taxpayers. So the governor's own attorney is creating an argument that will have disastrous impacts on our local school districts. $8 million in one school district in Mesa County, perhaps 10 to 20 million for my school district in Douglas County. That's not the way we should do government in this state.
You know, it's interesting to see the spectrum here. Even groups like ColoradoPolls.com, which is a liberal group, said, yeah, the court was right, but that's the problem with the Constitution. We had even the Denver Post saying, well, we don't like the ruling. The governor shouldn't be saying that this is not a problem, we're just going to win in the Supreme Court. It makes me wonder, and do you think the fix is in? Does the governor know something I don't know?
That's what I want to know. I mean, you read through all of these statements that they've made. From the governor is confident to, we knew that this would be decided by the Supreme Court all along, and you begin to wonder. Given past rulings, we'll see what happens, but I think there is something to be concerned about, and frankly, we need to know.
Let me go back to some of the specifics here. You, on behalf of the Independence Institute and all the plaintiffs, you didn't sue the state, you sued one entity, the Colorado Department of Education. Why did you sue them? Why did we target our lawsuit on them?
Well, there's a legal provision. I don't want to get too techie from a legal standpoint, but there's a provision that talks about standing and who are proper parties. And based upon my experience, the years I worked with Gail Norton when I was in the Attorney General's office, I developed a pretty strong appreciation for how you bring these kinds of actions. And the way the law works is you sue, if you're seeking to enjoin a statute, the proper defendant is the agency responsible for implementing that statute. And in this case, it's the School Finance Act. It was an amendment to the School Finance Act that caused this huge increase in property taxes. So when seeking to enjoin that amendment of the School Finance Act, the proper defendant is the Colorado Department of Education.
And the governor forced himself onto this suit as a plaintiff. He, what is the term, petitioned on.
He moved to intervene as a defendant.
All right, so he added himself on. So it was really kind of fun to watch. Across, on one table there was you and your partner, Alan Hale, who I think did just a fine job. And on the other side, there were 7 people, because you had the state's lawyer, you had CDE's lawyers, you had, who else's lawyers? There were just lawyers everywhere popping up. It was interesting that CDE, the Department of Education, has its own governing body, the school board there, Board of Education. A couple of those people, including Peggy Littleton and Bob Schaefer, stood up and said, this is ridiculous. Let's stipulate with the lawsuit. Let's ask the people. And there seems to be some strife on the board right now whether or not to appeal this. So one, thanks to Peggy Littleton and Bob Schaefer, who stood up for taxpayers and said, just ask first. But secondly, we don't know if the board